Hi out there, this is Heather Vickery, and you've tuned in to the Brave Files podcast. I'm really delighted to have you here with me this week, and today's episode is special. I'm introducing you to an incredible human being. Mashaun Simon is a Black, gay, Southern pastor. After he turned his back on all organized religion, Mashaun finally discovered that love, true love, isn't constrained by the boundaries of religion, sexual orientation, or race. This esteemed writer, podcast host, pastor, and anti-racism activist shares his inspiring story of finding a community that nurtures, supports, and loves him unconditionally. Here are some golden takeaways from my conversation with Mashaun. Once you find a community that supports and nurtures you, for goodness sakes, stay there. And don't be afraid to make your own choices, even when it's uncomfortable. Perhaps it's especially important when it's uncomfortable. Sharing your wins is a great way to motivate and inspire others. It's especially great for those who look up to you and support you. You may be a mentor to more people than you realize. And finally, your family history does not define you. You have the power to define yourself. That is something that comes up week after week in the Brave Files podcast. Your past does not have to be your future, and you are not defined by the stories that other people have written for you or the lives that they think you should lead. This is your one and only life, and we want you to write your own story. Oh, wait a minute, though. Before we start the show, I want to tell you about something super, super exciting. We know you like to listen to podcasts because you're listening to this one. But have you ever thought about starting your own podcast? Does the idea of that excite you? Can you imagine seeing your name on iTunes, having a devoted audience, and sharing your message, whatever it is, with the world? You know, more than 60 million people listen to podcasts daily, and that's in the United States alone. It's a lot of people that could be hearing what you have to say. The world is ready for your message, and it's time to start that podcast. If this excites you and you're thinking, okay, but damn, Heather, starting a podcast is a lot of work, and I have no idea where to start, I have really good news for you. We are hosting another live Q&A session about why this is a great time to start a podcast and how to get started on July 16th at 2 p.m. Central. It's a totally free day, but you do have to register at podcastpoweracademy.com. This free Q&A session is brought to you by me and the team of experts at the Podcast Power Academy. If you're not familiar with what we're doing with the Podcast Power Academy, come and check it out so that you can listen to all of our experts share with you what it takes to get started with a podcast and how we can help you go from concept to podcast in just a few short weeks. Whether or not you're interested in working with us, which is a high-touch hybrid program that combines training, coaching, and a massive number of actual deliverables like custom music, full custom branding, copyright, and audio editing. Whether or not you want that level of support, we want to help you get your podcast out into the world. So head on over to podcastpoweracademy.com and be sure to register for our July 16th session at 2 p.m. Central. We cannot wait to see you there. All right. Grab a beverage of your choice and get cozy because you are going to love this episode. And I have no doubt that you're going to fall in love with Mashaun Simon just like I did. And when you want to know more about him, head over to the show notes and check out all the links and learn everything you can about this super cool guy.
Critical thinker, pastoral, and uncommon.
This is Heather Vickery, and you're listening to The Brave Files, stories from people living courageously. When we choose bravely in big and small ways, it powerfully elevates our lives. I hope these stories connect with you and encourage you to embrace bravery in every possible way, day after day. Together, we can build a movement of courageous living that enriches both our lives and our communities. And if you enjoy the show, I ask you to please share it with others. Maybe think of someone who you want to choose bravely right alongside you. Thanks for tuning in. Now here's the show. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Brave Files podcast. This is your host, Heather Vickery, and I am here today with Mashaun Simon. He is a writer and a preacher from Atlanta, Georgia. His work centers on informing and empowering others as an advocate for race awareness, equity and fairness, and cultural competency. Mashaun has also created the Faith and Sexuality Symposium at Kennesaw State University as part of their Commission on LGBT initiatives. I have been so excited to sit down and chat with you, Mashaun. Welcome to the Brave Files.
Thank you. Thank you. I am excited and humbled and honored to be here.
You said the sweetest thing when we were just chatting right before we started recording, that you are always sort of surprised when people ask you to do shows like this.
Yes.
Tell me why.
Well, I mean, I guess for one, I always say that I am a little black boy from Decatur, Georgia, which is right outside of Atlanta. That is where my family still has a home and where I was raised most of my life. I like to say that I was born in Atlanta and raised in Decatur. But because I just recognize myself as that type of individual, then whenever anybody wants to hear anything from me, any opinion I may have, perspective I may have, it's a little jarring. It's a little surprising. I have done some impressive things in my life, written for some impressive publications, gone to some impressive schools, but I'm still just a little black boy from Decatur, Georgia.
Isn't it so fascinating how the things we are consistently told just sort of sit in our gut and speak to us and inform us? I imagine it's been quite a lot of work to not let that part of your history be the leading part of your life. Yeah,
it's very real work. Funny you say that. I was just talking to a coworker of mine recently about some things that are going on in pop culture and the struggles that we have from our traditional backgrounds, particularly our traditional religious backgrounds.
Yeah.
And I said to her, being that I identify as black, same gender loving from the South, I still have some of that traditional stuff in me. And it's very real work to sometimes push against that. So yeah, there are moments when who we are, what we are, where we've come from are still present in us. But I think it is also necessary and important to lift those things up because our history is a part of us. Yeah. Our history plays a very large role in how we see ourselves, how we see other, and where we're going.
Yeah, it sure does. That was really beautifully said. So why don't you give us a little bit of background? Tell us about that little boy growing up in the South and sort of what kind of little kid were you that you led yourself into this really big life? I mean, I hear that you're saying you still feel like this little boy from Atlanta, but you've done some really incredibly important things. So how did we get here?
Good question. I have no idea. I have no idea as to how I got to where I got. Part of that is because, in the past couple of years, my father had a stroke.
I'm sorry.
In March of 2000 and March 30th. 2016 is when my father had a stroke. And growing up, there was not a whole lot that I knew about my family history on my father's side. But since his stroke, I've been doing a lot of research. And I always knew I had a great aunt by the name of Clevia Parks. We called her Aunt Snooky, who was very big on education. She got a degree from Morris Brown College. She was a teacher and an educator for most of her career before she died. But what I did not know is my great-grandmother or my grandmother, my father's, I'm trying to make sure I get this right. My father's grandmother.
So your great-grandmother.
Yes, was very big on education. And as I understand it, some years ago when my family was living in outskirts of Atlanta, beyond like Conyers and Covington, they packed up one day and moved closer to Atlanta because my great grandmother did not want her kids to work the field in the way that she had and our ancestors had.
Oh, wow.
She was very big on education. And because of that, they invested a lot of energy and time and money into making sure that my Aunt Snooky went to college and got a degree. And that has sort of continued in me. I guess there's a part of me that believes that I got here because of the prayers of my great grandmother. I liked school growing up. I was very big on reading growing up. And I think it was reading that helped me to be able to see beyond the environment in which I was in.
I love that.
And so I think that played a role in me achieving and accomplishing many of the things that I have achieved and accomplished. Those prayers of my great grandmother, but also my natural curiosity for reading and writing.
I'll tell you, there are so many fascinating things about that. I kind of have chills. I've been doing a lot of reading about what is genetically passed down from generation to generation in as much as it relates to trauma.
Right.
But what I just heard you say is we also get to take solace in the fact that from generation to generation in our DNA is love of learning and curiosity and willingness to try new things, right? It's important to know that trauma can be passed down.
Yes. Yes.
It's important in a healing process as a person, as a community, as the whole world. But it's also important to know that the good things come down as well.
Yes, there are things that are innately a part of us. Curiosities, passion, drive, curiosity. I think I said that already.
You did. You really like that one.
Like there's something about the curiosity. But I think there are some things that our parents, our great grandparents, our great great grands give us, their passions, their dreams, their prayers, their desires, that when they can't achieve them or have gone as far as they've gone, it then becomes a part of our DNA to get to where they could not get to.
That's magic. It really is.
Yeah.
And then the paving of the way. I love your great grandmother. What an incredible human it sounds like she was, and what a gift she passed down, because so many folks are not given that gift. They don't value learning and critical thinking and changing your circumstances. I am reminded, you're talking about reading and having mentors. I'm reminded of a line that I read in Trevor Noah's book, Born a Crime. Have you read this?
I love that book.
I did too. I loved it too. He said, and this comes to me all the time, we cannot dream of things we cannot imagine.
Yes. I think that is true. But I also think sometimes our biggest dreams, our biggest accomplishments are the result of dreams we didn't know we had. So
Absolutely.
Sometimes there are some things that we cannot imagine that then become possibilities to us because of another dream. It's almost like a build-on of the initial dream.
Yes, I feel that 100%. But what I was relating that to specifically is what the gifts that you received from your aunt, who received from her grandmother, that kind of thing, and the books that you were reading, right? All of a sudden, there's this whole new world of possibility. What kind of books did you like to read as a child?
So here's the thing. I don't remember.
Favorite?
No, I never really. So interesting enough, there was this program when I was growing up called Book It, where kids had to read a certain number of books and write some minor or small book reviews based on those books. And then when you reached your goal, you got a free personal pan pizza from Pizza Hut.
That's pretty awesome.
I pretty much got a personal pan pizza from Pizza Hut every week.
Good for you.
Because I was just soaking up whatever I could soak up. But I don't remember there being a favorite. Like, I remember reading a lot of Curious George. I remember at one point in high school reading Faulkner. I remember struggling with Shakespeare. I also remember doing a lot of James Baldwin. And I think James Baldwin is probably the writing that made the most impact on me. So Go Tell It on the Mountain, Giovanni's Room, were books that I remember reading when I was in high school. But they also made an impact on me because they felt like they were telling my stories. So Giovanni's Room by Baldwin, is the story of this young man sort of struggling with his sexual identity.
Yes.
Go Tell It on the Mountain is Baldwin's story about a young man who is growing up in a very religious household. And the impacts that household had upon him. And so I related to those stories because both of those stories were my stories.
Yes.
But I don't really remember very many books from my childhood other than that.
Okay. That is a nice little lead-in. May I ask you, when did you notice that you were not probably what your parents had imagined as far as sexual attraction went? When did you realize that you were gay?
So I had the revelation I think I've always known. I remember being in kindergarten, and when it came time for like nap time, I wanted to take a nap next to these two boys.
I love that.
One name was John. I won't say his last name.
No, don't do that.
And the other names was Chucky. And I remember wanting to take naps with John and Chucky. I remember those very vividly. I think by the time I got somewhere around 5th or 6th grade was the first time I ever told anybody that I thought I might be gay without really understanding what that meant.
Yeah.
Someone that I consider one of my best friends, actually more like a brother, I actually was the best man in his wedding in June of 2019.
Okay.
Was the first person I ever told about me.
And how did he react?
So we went in the 5th grade. And I just remember him sort of being like, okay, whatever.
Nice.
What I did not know at the time is he had female cousins much older than him who also identified, or at least one who identified as a lesbian.
Okay.
And so I think it was already something that had been introduced to him. And because I had this natural desire for him. I can't really say that I was interested in him or attracted to him, but there was something about him that drew him to me, made him feel safe to me, that he was the first person I ever told. We were in the 5th grade.
Yeah.
And after me telling him, he asked a couple questions because I made up some bogus story about going to the doctor and the doctor saying I had more estrogen in my body than testosterone. I was this kid who read a lot, knew a whole lot of information, but didn't always know the best ways in which to present it to others.
Sure, yeah.
So I would just make up these bogus explanations and thinking that I was just like a genius. So I remember telling him, and he pretty much was like, oh, okay, cool. So let's go down to the creek and let's play in the creek. And that was just it. Like, it didn't faze him. He
What a
didn't
gift.
budge from it. Right. Like,
Because what would have happened if his reaction had been negative? I mean, we don't know, right? But it may have had a detrimental effect on how you moved forward.
I probably would have retracted it. I probably would have retracted that story because I did have that experience with some friends after him.
Okay.
And found myself having to retract it until they felt more comfortable being able to accept it.
Okay. So how about your family? I mean, you had indicated to me earlier that it's kind of hard enough to grow up a little black boy in the South. Well, how did they react?
Not in the best way.
Yeah.
I did not officially come out to my family until I was much, much older. I was out of high school, my freshman year of college, and my family found out. At the time, I was writing for this teen newspaper called Vox, VOX, run by this organization called Youth Communication here in Atlanta.
Okay.
And I wrote a story about, I call it my come out story. I wrote a story about coming to grips with who I am and how I am and what that means for me. And I wrote that story because some years prior, I had written a story for them about what it was like losing my brother to HIV and AIDS.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
And what that impact had upon me and how I see myself in the world. And so this come out article was pretty much just sort of like the next step of that. And as a result, the story, which I had never anticipated happening, got to my parents and a few people at the church in which I grew up. And it didn't go very well. And my family and I continued to have issues for some years following. When I got married in June of 2018, there were some very difficult and hard conversations that I ended up having with my mother and that my sister ended up having with my father that we had just never really had before, but all of it was still rooted in their discomfort and issues and concerns around who I am and how I identify.
Did they attend your wedding?
No.
I'm so sorry.
My sisters did. A couple of my aunts did. And a cousin who I found out is my cousin on my father's side of the family after my father had his stroke attended. But my mother and my father did not attend.
I'm really sorry.
Yeah,
Those are difficult. Those are difficult things. It sounds like you had a lot of love around you, but that stings. I often wonder, because I have kind of a similar coming out story, not exactly the same. And I kind of wonder if somewhere subconsciously within us, it's just like, well, we're going to put this out there. There's always this chance.
Right.
Oh, I didn't think they were going to read it, but now it's just done. Now,
right.
So I accidentally outed myself on Facebook, of all places.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Facebook.
So I was reading, I had come out to some very special people in my life, and it had not gone well.
Okay.
And prior to that, I mean, my coming out had been, pretty breezy. And so I was reading an article about the reasons you shouldn't be afraid to come out. And I noticed that the author was engaging in conversation with people who made comments, and I was very alone. And so I made a comment, and my comment was like the whole thing, my name, where I lived, how many kids I had, what business I was in, the whole thing.
Oh, you put it out there.
I did, but I didn't know that comment was linked to my Facebook account.
Oh.
And that response went onto Facebook. And I didn't know it until the next day.
Oh, wow.
And by then, the phone, the messages, the text messages, it was off the hook. My then still spouse came into my bedroom. We'd been sleeping in separate rooms for a long, long time. And we were very friendly. And he said, "Hey, did you mean to do this?" And I'm like, "No." But then it was all done.
Yeah, I mean, it's really weird because it's like, you put it out there. So I put it out there, and so it's pretty similar. Like, I wrote this story about being who I am and coming to grips with that. And then I also ended up writing another story talking about like my first year in undergrad, which had pictures of me like on my college campus, in classes, et cetera, et cetera. Not even expecting that both of those stories were going to go in the same issue of the publication. And so here on page 6 is my coming out story, which also included like experiences of being molested as a child.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh my goodness.
But here's the thing. So I put those pieces in the story because I wanted to push back against this narrative of children who experience sexual abuse
become gay
because the people who sexually abused me were female and male. Yeah. And so I was a different kind of statistic. All of that was in that one story on page 6. And then on page 8 is a story about my first year in undergrad and these pictures of me in school. And so it was one of those situations of this is the perfect storm. Because one, these stories were not supposed to go together. So now people know what I look like. And two, and they know what school I go to. And two, because it was a teen publication, meaning that students who were like in high school were the only ones who really read the publication, people from my young girls from my church decided to take the paper to church and were reading it in church. And so other adults got a hold of it. And the only reason why they read it is because they saw the article with my pictures first. If that article had never been in there and those pictures had never been in there, then they would have never known to read it and then continue to read the rest of it. And so it was very much this I mean, you know, this
It was intended, clearly.
I don't know if it was intended, but
not
it was
by you, but
right.
I'm
Right.
not religious. You are.
Right.
You may say God. I would say the universe. Like
Yes.
that was intended.
Yes. Yes. It was like the perfect storm, and very much this is about to happen because this is what's supposed to be happening at this time. Yes. Very intended. Very universally intended.
And so, when I first introduced you, I said kind of casually that you're a preacher. You've obviously grown up in the church, in the Christian church. I have had this really. This is one of the reasons I've been so excited to talk with you. Is I was raised, we were kind of a creasters. Like we kind of went to church on Christmas and Easter, not really religious.
Mother's Day, Easter, Christmas. Yeah.
I sort of have settled very, very comfortably in a little bit of an agnostic state where I believe there is something at play. I don't know what it is, but I'm super, like whatever, just love and be loved. If whatever makes your life better for you to live, do that,
Yes.
right? But I have been really working on this initial visceral reaction I have when somebody starts a conversation or their Instagram, bio or whatever starts with Jesus. I go, oh, that's not my people. And not because of religion, but because of my LGBTQ status and the abuses. Right. And so I have been working on not making judgment and not putting people in boxes because of their religious status and assuming that they then are not going to be kind to me.
Right.
Which is challenging because...
Yes, it's very real work.
Yeah, often they are, right? And so can you share a little bit of that journey with us for you?
So for me, yes, it was difficult because around that time where my family found out about me and other people in the church found out about me was the very same time that I turned my back on the church and I turned my back on organized religion. I was done after that. I remember a woman telling me that she didn't really believe I was gay. She just felt as though I was trying to be rebellious against my parents and my family.
Jesus.
And my response was, but what would I have to be rebellious for?
Exactly. Why would I pick this?
Yes. Why would I pick this? And I've got it pretty good. Like it's not like my parents ever tried to keep me from experiencing life or being able to achieve my dream. So what reason would I have to rebel? Like it made no sense to me. And it also caused for me frustration around this mindset because you have told me for years since I've been in this church that God loves me, that Jesus wants me to come as I am. And now all of a sudden that's a problem and it's no longer welcome. And so I left the church. I was done. I was fed up. But it took a former friend of mine to convince me that I should go to church with him one day. And the church that we ended up attending is what we now understand and know as inclusive and affirming churches. Yeah. And so Atlanta has several affirming churches in the metro area. But at one time, there was only one or two. Actually, it was like two in the entire metro area. Now there are dozens. But at that time, there were only two. And this friend of mine felt as though it would be necessary for me to attend a service one Sunday. And I did. I love to say that I have this special affinity for the wilderness narratives in the Bible of these people who left what was home, left what was safe. So like Hagar and the Israelites, and spent years choosing to be in the wilderness because the wilderness was safer. I did that. I went into the wilderness because the wilderness was safer and I was more familiar with the wilderness than I was with what I considered to be home. But being a part of this church, Unity Fellowship Church of Atlanta, when I did, it was a turning point for me, because what it did is it helped me to start the process of having a very intentional conversation with God around where I am, who I am, and what I'm not sure I believe or do not believe. And I was able to do it in a community with other people who were going through some of the similar same things. It also started the process of introducing me to the idea of ministry, because for one, I had examples, and two, they gave me permission to engage the questions that I had. But it took me a while. It took me a really long time to support the idea of being committed to church. I became committed to community. And while this church was a church, I was there more for the fellowship in the community versus the church piece of it. I ended up answering my call several years later because I became friends with a young preacher in the Metro Atlanta area who he had started the process of coming out. He had been in the closet for several years and been a very popular preacher in the Southeast while in the closet. And he and I met randomly one day around Labor Day weekend, and he decided he wanted to be friends with me. I wasn't exactly interested. I'm kind of slow to make new friends. And so, but it was something interesting about our relationship, because I like to say I mentored him out of the closet, and he mentored me into ministry.
I love that.
It was really weird how, because he is from South Carolina, just very traditionally down home, just like what most people would assume or imagine about country black church being, singing a cappella, clapping hands.
Yeah.
He is very much, it is truly ingrained in him. And so I had a chance to be around someone who represented traditional church, while at the same time he was around someone who represented true freedom,
authenticity.
Yeah, true authenticity, true freedom. And so it was this wonderful relationship that we had, friendship, for about 4 or 5 years, where he grew as a openly gay preacher, and I grew as a minister, or embracing ministerial possibilities. But I ended up going to seminary because while I received this call, I didn't quite believe it.
Right.
I still questioned it. And so seminary for me was about going and getting a foundation around history and why we believe what we believe, and then trying my best to utilize that to be like, and this is why I don't think God should be calling me into ministry. And
Fascinating.
What happened is I ended up going into ministry.
Yeah. But I think the most successful people that I know, and the most successful religious people that I know, are folks who are comfortable with questioning.
Yeah.
Right. I don't know that I believe in a God, but
right.
I think we're supposed to question. And when you're raised and taught, like, just believe it and don't investigate it, I don't think that does anybody any favors.
Right. And I think one of the things that I try to lift up in my ministry is that while it does not serve us, I also understand why many of us are that way. Like when you think about the history, particularly when it comes to African Americans or descendants of Africans of slaves in this country, when it came down to engaging realities around faith and identity, they were never given permission.
Sure.
Like the only ways in which for a long time they could either engage God was to be in these spaces with the people who owned them, being told who God was and what God wanted from them. And I think some of that, when you talk about inheriting in our DNA trauma, is that stuff stayed with us. So we were never given permission to question this God that was introduced to us, that was used to oppress us. And now as we have some form of ownership or relationship with it, we still don't want to question it because that is what we were told we were supposed to do for so long.
Wow. That's a little earth-shattering for me. Yeah. Again, all of these ways that these things are passed down genetically. It's
Yeah.
fascinating.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think more people would be like you if they would question. They would find more faith. They would find more strength, and they would find more answers, and not shy away.
Yeah, because faith and religion is complicated. I mean, if you really look at the Bible and the ways that the Bible is presented to us, it's complicated. I mean, one minute you have you have a text telling us to live one way, and then it completely contradicts it like 2 books later. So it's a complicated piece of work.
It's complicated, and it's written by man.
Well, that is true. And so you're right. It is
There's
written
interpretation.
by man. There is interpretation. And I think sometimes still there is, if we want to really get into a theological conversation, I think
that wasn't my plan, but why not?
Let's just do it. Let's just do it. I think for me, it comes down to this space of when I started engaging what I thought I believed while I was in seminary, I kept landing on this reality that for me, the Bible is a diary. It is a true representation of people's walk in their life with this being that they believe to be greater than them, and the Almighty and the All-Knowing and the All-Present. And so in what ways can we utilize this book to just be that? It is a diary. It is a blueprint for how God did or maybe did not make God self-present in the lives of God's people.
And how that was perceived by the man who wrote it.
And how can we learn from that? How can we learn from these examples of what they were experiencing based off of their interpretation and their scenarios to impact us? And so for me, it gave me a little more freedom to say, this can still be a divine tool, but it's a divine tool showing this is how God did or did not play out in these people's lives at that time.
Yeah. I like that. I wish that there were more people who could remember, like, this is an interpretation from this person, right? And use it as a guide.
Written for a specific time.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So this is like super fascinating. I would actually love to know about the Faith and Sexuality Symposium you did. And I just want to say that I am so heartened and delighted that you're doing this type of thing. So for me as a person to not shy away from people who scream from the rooftops, I love Jesus. I need to see people like you out making everyone welcome and having these conversations so that I can continue to try and be a better person and not judge people and not shut people down.
And that's really what it should be about, I think.
Yeah. So tell me about this. It's funny. I have this really strange side note. I don't know how many people listening even know Kennesaw State University, but one of my very best friends is a professor there.
Oh, wow. Who, really?
It's random. I'll tell you offline. I don't know if she would. She's a history professor, and she probably wouldn't care, but I don't have her permission. So, but I'll see if you know her offline.
Good point. I got really caught up and was like, who?
I know. I had to try to remember sometimes that this is a public forum.
Yes.
So tell me about the Faith and Sexuality Symposium and even the Commission for LGBT Initiatives at a school in Georgia, a state school in Georgia.
Yeah. So I have since left Kennesaw State. I left Kennesaw. It's almost 2 years now since I left that institution. But at the time that I was working there, I was hired to be what they call a diversity specialist in the Office of Diversity and Inclusion. And at that time, I don't know if they're still in existence, but there were these commissions that were committed to different areas of diversity or different areas of protected classes from a federally funded perspective. And so you had a commission on LGBT issues. You had one on race. There was one on veterans. There was one on based on gender, and there was one on environmentalism. I think that's all 6. I sometimes forget. And so as part of my job, my responsibility was to be a support or an aid to the commissions for whatever they were attempting to do. So it was created by a former president to be almost like an advisory committee on things that faculty, staff, and students felt as though needed to be worked on or changed or enhanced at the institution. And then as that president left, other presidents continued their work or continued their presence, and they were sort of given the power or the freedom to create programming or create space for conversations and opportunities for change at the institution. And so there were people who worked there on the staff who worked in areas like student affairs and the LGBT Student Resource Center who knew my background as far as seminary was concerned. They didn't know my ministerial background, but they knew my academic background.
Okay.
And so they wanted to do this event, but weren't quite sure what kind of event it was. And so I ended up chairing this effort. And so we did a two-part symposium. We first brought individuals from diverse faith backgrounds who also identified as members of the LGBT community. Okay. And we had them share sort of their experiences of being LGBT in their faith spaces. And so we had a lesbian Muslim. We had...
That's a hard thing to be, by the way.
Yes, very hard.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of support in certain Muslim spaces for the LGBT community, depending upon where you are, and you'd be surprised.
That's good to know.
So in addition to her, we had, on this panel, we had the lesbian Muslim, a gay minister from the Unitarian Universalist movement. We had a transgender, or someone who was pre-transgender graduate student whose work is in the area of faith and sexuality. And then we had a man who was from a Native American tribe who provided input or perspective on what it means to be a part Native American in the ways in which they support what they call dual spiritualism. Okay. And so for them, homosexuality is considered a blessing because you have these dual spirits, which was fascinating to me.
I love that. Yes.
Fascinating.
There's a lot of history there for folks who want to research that. It's amazing. It is fascinating.
It was mind-boggling. And so we did this panel where I sort of kicked it off, allowing each individual to talk about their faith journey and how they present themselves in the areas in which they operate. And then after that panel discussion, we did a talk back. And so we had faculty, students, staff sit in a circle with some of the individuals from the panel, but then we also had a lesbian Jew and a transgender, a Black transgender woman Christian. Okay. Join that conversation. Wow. And just talk. And it just turned into this almost like a round table of sharing experiences and perspectives. And it allowed staff at Kennesaw State to ask questions of these individuals who have walked the walk to figure out ways in which they can be more supportive to the student body.
That is so important and so valuable. Did you have a good response and reaction to this?
So there was, the audience was more, there were more people who attended the symposium than the talkback. Okay. So I was a little disappointed about that. But, and let me also add that the panel discussion took place in Kennesaw's theater. So their theater program has a theater in it. And we had the panelists sit in chairs on the floor of the theater while the guests sat in the seats. And the way the theater is set up is it's very much, if you can sort of imagine a Greek amphitheater where the battlefield is like in the middle and it's surrounded by these seats. That's sort of how the theater was set up. Okay. And it was dark. Well, not dark, but, the floor is black, the curtains are black, and the light is shining on the floor. So it created like this spotlight or this focus that I was really going for. And then the talk back, the circle of chairs, took place in Kennesaw's museum, among some of the art pieces
That's very
that
cool.
were there. Yeah, like I was very intentional around background and backdrop, as I was trying to situate these experiences. And so I also want to sort of lift that up because I think it was very important for ensuring that we had authentic conversation in a way that was just different. So instead of holding these events in classrooms or in auditoriums, we held them in creative spaces,
I think that's so valuable.
hoping that the creative space would also inspire a certain level of freedom. And so it was a pretty unique and pretty special experience. Some of the feedback that I got back afterwards was that they were glad that we had the opportunity to do that type of programming, and that people were very appreciative of that type of programming after the fact. Unfortunately, they haven't been able to have an event like that since I left.
That is really, really unfortunate.
Yeah.
Is
it's
that
very
because they
unfortunate.
don't have the leadership that they had in you?
I think that is a part of it. I think that is a very big part of it. I also think that after I left, Kennesaw started going through some other transitional changes. A new president was named, departments were restructured, a new chief diversity officer was named, a new diversity specialist was also hired, and so some of the priorities changed, but then some of the decision makers and players also changed.
Okay. Fascinating.
Because, like I said earlier, I don't even know if the commissions are still in existence. I'm assuming they are, but then also those leaderships change. So things just change.
Things change, but I certainly hope they're still there. I don't know. Sometimes with the way I don't know if it's just the world or if it's just our country is going, I feel like we take one step forward and then 10 steps back, and like
True.
we're still progressing, but boy, does it feel like somebody tied some weights around our ankles.
It seems like progression has slowed down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really tough. Mashaun, does this work that you're doing, both the advocacy work, racial awareness, LGBTQ awareness, equity, and then your ministry, does this feel like brave work to you?
You know, it's interesting that you asked me that question. So I will initially answer it by saying yes, it does feel like brave work for me. However, I say yes because that is what people have told me.
Okay.
Because again, for me, I'm just a little black boy from Decatur doing the things that I consider to be passion and living in the ways in which I feel as though I'm supposed to be living. But I also do recognize, because of relationships and friendships I have with people who are beyond Atlanta, that everybody doesn't have those privileges.
Yeah.
Everybody doesn't have those opportunities. One of my great best friends, who is a former writer for the Associated Press and now doing amazing things with covering the 2020 election, when she attended my wedding in June of 2018, she said, "You don't realize how you, as a black gay man, getting married is a courageous act."
Yes.
And I had never thought about it because I was just living. I was just doing what I felt to be necessary. And my husband and I wanted to get married, and we could. And so we did that. But there were so many people who either attended the wedding or helped us plan the wedding who kept talking about the kind of example that we were setting, because most of them, if not all of them, had never been to a black male same-sex wedding before.
Yeah.
And how we just living and doing our thing was a courageous act for them.
That is such a little gift right there, because it is true. We often don't realize when we're just trying to live our own best lives, how it impacts people around us. I have a background in wedding planning. My partner used to own a company called the Gay Wedding Institute, which is now called the Equality Institute. But she would teach wedding industry professionals on how to work with and market towards the LGBT community. And one of the things that she would regularly say was that most of the people attending these weddings have never been to a gay wedding before. And then to think about never been to a gay wedding where the couple is black and male just adds another element to that. But that overwhelmingly, what people leave thinking is, that was just a wedding. Like a really special wedding, but there's nothing freaky. It's just a wedding.
It just was.
Really lovely expression of commitment, lifelong commitment and love for one another.
And we were very intentional about our wedding going into it. Like, we wanted it to be intimate, but we also wanted it to be to ensure that there were three components to it. That there was a religious component to it, because we recognized that for us, because of our religious backgrounds, we were getting married before the eyes of God.
Yeah.
But at the same time, that what we were doing was also a legal component. And so the person who officiated our wedding is also my cousin-in-law, my husband's cousin, who is a lesbian and a Superior Court judge in Massachusetts.
Love that.
And so I was very intentional about that. And then we had a blessing from a straight married Black couple who the husband was a pastor. And then we had a blessing from a Black gay married couple who the pastor is my godbrother and my pastor, who, when they got married, they didn't do a ceremony. But we were very intentional around bringing all those pieces together. And then third, we wanted to ensure that it represented us and it represented who we were and how we were in the world. And so all the other components to it, the people we had involved, our colors, bringing our families together in a ceremony around that was about us, not realizing that we were doing something courageous and something innovative all at the same time.
Yeah. Oh, that's just magical. It's just beautiful.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yes. I had a couple back when I was doing weddings that two men that were getting married. We live in Chicago, but they were getting married in Wisconsin, and they were getting married just a few months after the 2016 election. And I will never forget them calling me the day after the election and saying, we want to legally get married in Illinois and not Wisconsin in case marriage is overturned, because Wisconsin did not protect them, but Illinois did.
Wow. It's interesting to have to make those decisions.
Yes. The things.
But the reality is, we're not that far removed from having to make those decisions.
No.
Like, they're just, most people don't realize that. Most people are sort of in this space of, oh, it's here. But no, just a couple years ago, there were people who had to make very intentional decisions for the safety of themselves and the safety of their families.
Absolutely.
That they don't have to make now.
And hopefully they never have to again. But I'm on guard with the government. I don't trust the government right now to continue to protect us. I do not.
Right.
They are not continuing to protect us, actually. So from marriage currently, yes, but in other ways.
In other ways, there are other ways that they can get us.
Yeah, severely under attack.
Yeah.
Woo, we could talk about a lot of things, Mashaun. I'm actually going to be in Atlanta in October, and I would love to meet you in person.
Let us know. Yes, definitely. We can get together.
That would be fun.
I would love to. That'd be great.
Yeah.
And we may continue this conversation.
Exactly. So many conversations. I would love to know. So just, again, all of the work that you're doing, and it's so important and impactful. I call myself a social justice warrior and an anti-racism warrior. I use my privilege as much as I can to do good, because I have the privilege, and it's like my responsibility.
That is very important.
It's so important, and all of you listening, you are called upon to do the same thing.
Yes.
But we don't always take good care of ourselves when we're in this kind of work.
Right. And
your work so much revolves around supporting other people and teaching other people. So how do you practice self-care?
That's a great question. And interesting enough, I keep getting that question thrown at me. I've gotten that question thrown at me several times in the past couple of weeks. So what we did not mention is, or maybe we did, I don't remember, that I'm also the co-host of a podcast called Before Nine.
I'm glad you brought it up. I was going to, but I'm glad you did.
Perfect. So just recently, my co-host asked me that question in one of our episodes, and it made me really think. And it made me really think because at the time that she asked it, and I knew why she asked it, is there was a lot of change happening around me in my personal life and as well as my ministerial life. So coming into 2020, one of the things that I have dedicated myself to is doing a better job of taking care of myself. And most recently, after having been sick with this really random stomach bug for like 4 days, and my friends having to be really, really hard on me to say, no, stop, take care of your stuff and stop taking care of us, I've started developing some very interesting practices because I do recognize that in order for me to be effective in the things that I need to do, one of the things I need to do is to take care of myself.
Yes.
So I just recently finished a 2-day juice detox.
Okay.
It was probably one of the most difficult, not difficult, but one of the most challenging things I've ever had to do, where I drank juice, grapefruit juice, orange juice, lemon juice, and water as one whole combination concoction for 52 hours straight. That's all I took in. Partly because I wanted to be more serious about my health as well as my mental capacity. And it was a great experience because it was the sharpest I've been in a long time. It caused me to focus in a way I had never focused before. But it also showed me the things in which I am capable of that I don't always consider that I am capable of. And so I've gotten a lot more serious about my health. I also take the time to listen to other podcasts just to sort of escape my world and just sort of hear what other people are doing. I also, with a friend of mine, started a book club here in Atlanta.
I love that.
Which, yes, I know is just another something for me to be responsible for.
So what are you reading?
Right now, we haven't selected our newest book. We did just finish reading Just Mercy.
Okay.
And we read a book called Divine Sex that I did not get a chance to finish, but I'm going to because there's something again on this spiritual level of the combination between our spiritual being and our sexual beings that we sometimes separate, that we should really consider connecting more so. And so I'm reading again. And then I do quiet time. So my husband works in retail, and there are some days where he works late in the evenings, and I take those times to just be in the house and quiet. So I turn off all the TVs, most of the lights, and I'll just be in my home office just with myself and with God to just sort of center myself and just be able to commune with God. It also helps me in my preaching moments or preparing for my sermons for preaching moments. So those are the things that I've started working on at the start of this year of 2020 because I recognize the importance of taking care of myself. And my friends are also telling me I need to do a better job.
Okay. Well, I'm glad you're listening to them. I think
I'm trying.
Those all sound magical, somewhat related, but not completely related. I am a big fan of celebration. Now, I mean that in the most basic way. My mom always said, any holiday, any reason to celebrate together, we would do that. But also, when I've done a hard thing, I've been going to the gym every morning, and that's not something I've done ever in my whole life, 45 years old.
That's great.
I finally started doing it, and I'm celebrating those wins. And I love to celebrate. And I'm curious, how do you celebrate your successes, both the little everyday ones that add up to being big things, and then also the big things?
That's interesting. I'm married to someone who celebrates almost everything. Like, he loves birthdays, he loves holidays. I think he struggles with the ways in which I don't celebrate as much as he does, and for very different reasons. Like, there are some things that I choose to celebrate that I think sort of distract us from the things we really should be celebrating. And so, like, Valentine's Day is one of those times of the year that I don't necessarily like, because I struggle with the mindset of doing this just on this day and doing it because everybody else is doing it.
Right.
However, I say all that to say, when I do accomplish things, like recently I decided that I wanted to write a grant proposal to get a grant to write a book. And I gave myself a very real deadline. I completed that deadline, and the way in which I celebrated was I told my village. I shared the accomplishment with the people who I love and I know who support me and I know who were encouraging me and praying for me in the process. I shared that information with them just to sort of be like, look what I did.
Love that. Yeah.
And then I also shared it with my family, which is something I don't normally do. because the way in which I see the world is very different from my family. And so those are moments like me writing a grant proposal for a book is a big deal to me, but would not necessarily be a big deal to my family. However, I decided this time to share it with my family.
Wonderful.
So that I can continue to be a lesson for my nieces and my nephews who are still trying to figure out portions of their life and where they want to move forward in. And so those are some of the things I tend to do. And I share on social media with the people who are following me on Facebook and Instagram, some key moments or some key situations just to sort of be like, look what I did. And also to try and use it as a motivator for them. So those are some of the small things I do as far as celebration
I love those.
is concerned. Part of the reason is I used to struggle with being the center of attention. So sharing was difficult because I felt as though those were private things that I didn't need to be giving or telling to everybody else. But I am learning that it is worth sharing with others because it then motivates others.
Yeah. 100% worth it. Thank you for sharing that, because I think there are lots of folks out there listening who haven't quite figured out what a gift that is. When we celebrate together, we give other people permission to celebrate and to feel good, and joy changes lives. So I love that.
Yes, it's true.
Mashaun, what is your favorite charitable organization to support?
My favorite charitable organization right now is Aid Atlanta. Aid Atlanta is a nonprofit organization that is committed to reacting, responding, and eradicating HIV and AIDS in our global society. When I was 13 years old, my brother died from complications to HIV and AIDS.
So sorry.
So I have always been committed since then of finding and creating ways to be an advocate for that community. I have several friends that are also living with the disease. So Aid Atlanta is one of the organizations that I am the most committed to and the proudest of for the work that they are doing in the metropolitan Atlanta area to be a support system for those who are living with the disease.
That's so great. Thank you for that. I ask my listeners each week to get to know them. They'll be our charity of the week. We'll have links in the show notes. Whatever you have to give, whether it's time or money. I know a lot of folks in Atlanta. In fact, our editor, Andrew, hi, Andrew. He's listening to this before the rest of you do, is in Atlanta. So get to know the organization. Give what you can, even if it's just social media shares and likes, because we're called upon to step up and into these things together to make life better and to make the world better.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Mashaun, I could talk to you for days, and we've already gone twice over what we normally try to do here, and I don't even care. I knew it going into it. Can you share your 3 words with us one last time?
3 words: critical thinker, pastoral, and uncommon.
Yes. So sometimes I will say, why did you pick those words? But I really think we have a firm understanding of why and how you picked those words. You are uncommon in the most wonderful of ways. I hope that what you've shared inspires somebody else who's listening, or somebody you meet in all of the things you do every day, to step out just a little bit more and to push a little bit harder and to ask hard questions and to have hard conversations. So I can't thank you enough for what you're doing and for taking the time to be here with us today.
And I thank you for the invitation and the opportunity. This has been a pleasure and a privilege and an honor.
Listeners, this was great, right? I'd love to hear what you thought about this episode, what you think about any of the episodes, or something that you'd maybe like to see in the future, or even just how you're out choosing bravely. Give us a call at 312-646-0205 and let me know. I listen to every message, and I promise to get back to you personally. I'm so glad you were here with us today. We'll talk to you next week. This is Heather Vickery reminding you today and always to go out and choose bravely. You've been listening to The Brave Files, stories from people living courageously. To learn more about the show, find our show notes, or get some great bonus content, visit thebravefilespodcast.com. And we'd love to know what you think. You can give us a call at 312-646-0205. Let us know your thoughts on the episode, the show in general, or maybe share with us how you're out choosing bravely. This episode is brought to you by Vickery & Co. Success Coaching, coaching that helps you maintain a life well lived and a business well run. Learn more at vickeryandco.com. Our music is produced by Matt Lewis. Follow him on Instagram at mattmmusic or visit his website, theunionband.com. We couldn't do any of this without our extraordinary audio engineer, Andrew Olson. Learn more about him and check out his work at findandrewolson.com. And special thanks to our associate producer, Kim Statler. I'm your host and executive producer, Heather Vickery. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll talk to you next week.